Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming today. I'm Lauren, one of the Teach in Spain coordinators. Probably have emailed you, maybe talked to some of you on the phone. And we're just going to go over today what teaching abroad in Spain is like, but specifically we're going to talk about what to really expect over these next few months before September comes. So like I said, I'm Lauren, and Luke, do you want to come in and introduce yourself as well?
Sure thing. Hi, everybody. My name is Luke Beland. I'm the manager for CIEE's Teach Abroad team. Work with Lauren all the time on the Teach in Spain program and our other offerings as well. I'll be helping out with Q&A in the background. So we've got a Q&A tool built into Zoom, of course. We're going to ask that you use that to send us any questions just to help us keep track and manage those. We may be able to answer some of them live as we go through the presentation. For some questions, I'll just type a response, and some we'll hold for the end when, of course, we've got lots of time for Q&A. So look forward to this presentation. Back over to you, Lauren. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll try to keep this, I want to get a lot of the questions answered, so we'll try to keep it brief. We're hoping to stay around an hour, so feel free to, like Luke said, put questions in the Q&A. We'll address them in real time or at the end. Okay, so today we're going to go over what is the language and culture assistant position, where are the school placements, what's included in the program with CIEE, different program options that we have, housing, the visa, our TEFL course, savings for Spain, and then, like we said, a Q&A at the end. Okay, so the language and culture assistant position is jobs all over the region of Madrid in public, primary, or secondary schools. Teaching hours are 16 per week. You might be in a school longer than 16 hours a week, but the teaching time is supposed to be 16. And this is over the course of 4 days. So you'll be getting 3-day weekends. Typically, you have Monday or Friday off, so you can have a lot of time to explore Spain and the area that you're living. Each month, you'll get a stipend of 1,000 euros. And this is paid at the end of every month. So for example, teaching duties this fall will start at the beginning of October, and your first paycheck would be around the first week of November. So you do need to keep that in mind when you're going to Spain, that your first paycheck won't be till November, but it's paid each month. Your position, you'll be assisting with lessons, helping with small group work, and doing cultural exchange activities. And it really it does depend on your school, but just keep in mind that you're an assistant teacher. You are not a lead teacher, so you shouldn't have your own classroom. You're really there to help your teachers in your school. Okay, so this picture shows on Google Maps. If you can actually just look up the region of Madrid, this is the area where all the teachers are placed. It could be anywhere in the region. So most are placed in the surrounding suburbs, and you can access it by public transportation. We will look over your preferences in your application. We have preferences for age range, location, and if you want to be placed near with a friend or partner. We do look at that in the order that commitment tasks are completed. Then we look at your preferences and place you that way. People will live all over. Some commute from the center to the suburbs. Some live near their schools. But this just gives you an idea of what the region of Madrid looks like. Okay, so what's included with our program is we have placement in the region of Madrid, as we just said, a lot of pre-departure assistance, including a lot of visa assistance as well. In the coming months leading, like around late March or early April, we'll have a visa webinar. We'll get you a really extensive visa guide, and we'll be tracking your progress along with your visa and giving you updates on what needs to be done. We don't need to get into that too much today, but that'll be a big help. We have INEX International Emergency Insurance. airport pickup on your arrival day and transportation to your hotel. We have in-person orientation with a hotel stay in Spain. That hotel stay is 2 days to 7 days, depending on your program, and ongoing support from our staff in Madrid. So we have a few different programs. Our most popular one that most people do is our regular program. That one has a 7-day hotel stay upon arrival with 4 days of orientation. If you're wanting to get to Spain a little bit earlier and get the immersion experience, you can choose to do a 2 or 4 week homestay with Spanish classes. So some people want to get there a little early, meet Spanish people, learn the language, and that's a great option if you're able to go in late August and get some of that experience beforehand. And then we also do have a basics program for people who've lived in a Spanish speaking country. Maybe they're fluent in Spanish and have some teaching experience. So if you've already done something similar to this before, we do have that option as well. You can also add a TEFL certificate for $1,000. It is optional, but we do have a TEFL teaching English as a foreign language certificate available for those who would like that. Okay, and our housing. So after orientation, you'll be given your hotel stay. And then after that, it is your responsibility to find your housing on your own. We do provide resources for this, different like websites, Facebook groups. You can live pretty much wherever you want. You would want to look at where you're placed in the region and kind of map out a commute that's reasonable for you. Is it important for you to live in the city center? Is it important for you to live by your school? What's your budget? There's a lot of factors that come into that. It does take, some people find housing very quickly, and other people, it does take them a while. It really depends on what your preferences are and how you'd like to live. After the hotel stay, if you don't have housing, we would just recommend getting an Airbnb close to your school or something short term, so you can kind of have a place to stay for, 1 to 3 weeks until you find that permanent housing. This is one of my favorite pictures of someone who posted on Instagram her view from her window, and I was very jealous, so I wanted to add that as well. Okay, and about the visa, we will provide extensive guidance on this starting around like middle of March or so. It is a student visa or a language and culture assistant visa. It's not a working visa. So you would be able to get your stipend for teaching. You would not, though, be allowed to work in like a cafe or restaurant. It's not a work permit. So you would need to you'd have to get the student visa, which also does allow for you to do tutoring or side jobs like that. So some people with that visa, it's fine to get jobs, just one-on-one tutoring for extra cash if you'd like. You are financially responsible for the visa. We'll go over some of those expenses in a little bit. And just make sure that your passport does not expire before October 2023. If it does, you need to renew that like right after this conversation, right after this call. You can email us if you're concerned, talk about kind of a timeline on getting that done as soon as possible. Because you'll be applying for a visa this summer, you can't travel internationally because you'll be giving up your passport for, a month or more. So if you are concerned about that, just email us and we can see if it's reasonable or not for your travel plans. But that is something that if you're traveling after June 15th, it might not work. Okay, our TEFL course. So a TEFL certificate is teaching English as a foreign language. It is an optional add-on to teaching in Spain. Some countries do require it, others don't. It is a really helpful course, especially if you've not taught abroad or maybe you've not lived abroad before. We have an 150-hour course. It's an 11-week course that starts every 2 weeks, and it never expires. I personally, I got a TEFL before I went and taught abroad just because I didn't really know what I was getting myself into and I was nervous and I didn't know. So I thought that that was really helpful when I went into the classroom and had some background on what the teaching expectations and job would be like. If you do have questions, you can email us, or you can also just email TEFL@ciee.org. Okay, so some additional expenses to take into consideration. Your passport. So I think most of you who've applied do have a valid passport that's not expiring soon, but that is a fee to think of if you don't have a passport yet. The visa application is $160. That's for all student visas for Spain. There are other visa documents that you'll need, and think of budgeting between $75 and $150. Like I said, we'll go through these documents more extensively in about a month or so. Sometimes, depending on what your state driver's license is or what your student ID state is, you might have to travel to the consulate. There's 8 or 9 different consulates in the US and 3 in Canada. And some require travel, some don't, but we can get into that more later. You can email me as well. And then you have to think of your flight round trip. So to go to Spain, you can go on a one-way ticket. You do not have to book a round trip flight. So don't feel the need to like book a round trip flight when you go. That's something you can figure out when you're in Spain and you know when you want to leave. When you go, we do recommend 2,000 to 3,000 in savings, just because you'll have to think of apartment expenses. You don't get a paycheck until the first week of November. So having some savings as cushion for when you arrive is going to be necessary. Okay, so this is kind of what the next few months are going to look like. We have our deadline coming up on March 1st. We're going to have a visa webinar as well and a visa guide, and we'll make sure that you're on track and you know exactly what you need to do to apply. You'll have to think of setting appointments for a background check and a doctor's appointment. Those are both for your visa. Later in the spring, you'll get your placements, and that's when you can really look at where you're teaching, what age you're teaching, where you might want to live, and how your commute might look like. That's going to be a time where you can do that. That's when the remaining balance is due as well. And we'll get you a lot of pre-departure materials at this time, such as guidance for housing, learning about life in Spain, how to teach, and a lot of information for pre-departure to go to Spain. We'll also put you in a Facebook group so that all the teachers for CIEE who are going abroad in the fall, they can meet each other. You can see if there's someone working at your school, in your neighborhood, someone who wants to be roommates. So it's a really good way to connect before you go abroad. We'll also be handing out important letters for your visa. If you do the Immersion program, the 2 or 4 week homestay, you'll want to apply for your visa around the end of June or so. Then you can see the rest of the timeline. We'll need your diplomas if you've not graduated yet. You'll buy flights after you get the visa. And so we ask that you don't buy flights before that because you just want to make sure you have it in your hand. We'll have a pre-departure online orientation with Madrid as well before you go. And then you'll head to Spain either in late August or September. So that's kind of what this general timeline looks like. So you can kind of know what to expect before you go, what's going to happen over the next few months. And yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up pretty quick. I talk fast, so thank you for listening, but now I'm here to answer questions and we can go over that. So Luke, if you want to go through some questions.
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm going to be scrolling through the questions. We've got a pretty big audience today, so we may be grouping some of them together. And thanks to everybody who sent in questions so far. And if you've got questions, jump right in on that Q&A tool and send them our way. While I'm looking up the first questions, Lauren, do you want to explain what that little QR code is on the left of the screen?
Yes. Yeah. I thought they would just go and find out themselves magically, but it's our Instagram. We actually, there is Christy, who is currently in Madrid. She's doing a takeover this weekend, so she'll be answering questions as well. So if you want to hear someone besides Luke and I talk, as you will a lot over the next few months, go in and ask her questions. They've been every weekend we have someone doing that. And so it's kind of nice to get perspective from people who are actually there now on the program. So scan that code and go ask Christy questions.
Okay, so first question, we have several people asking for a little more detail about the visa process. How soon would people be able to make appointments with the consulates? And how long does it take to get a visa?
Yeah, so let's go back to visa. Okay. So you cannot make appointments for your visa now. So that's something where it's just too early. I'm thinking that you'll probably be making your appointments around May or June to apply for your visa. Like we said, you'll need to have background checks and doctor's appointments. And also, it's too soon to do that now because that needs to be those documents, the background and doctor's appointments have to be within 90 days of applying for your visa. So for example, if you're like, I'm going to the doctor next week, I'll just use that. That's going to be too soon. When you set your appointment, like around spring, like I'd say like late spring or so, you'll set your appointment. Each consulate operates slightly different with the way they do appointments. And it will take probably 4 to 6 weeks to get your visa back. And you want to make sure that you look at your start date, which we will have a better idea on your start date soon, and subtract 4 to 6 weeks and give yourself some wiggle room. So most people will be applying around late June or early July for their visa.
Awesome. Thanks, Lauren. Okay. Another question is, someone's curious about the immersion program. What kind of language courses are provided with that? Are there level tests? Just looking for more information about those courses.
Yeah, for the immersion program, like we said, you can choose a 2 or 4 week option. And then sometime in the summer, you'll be tested on your skills. So it can be from people who have no Spanish skills at all up to people who just really want to work on, their fluency. So you'll be tested and put in a class that's appropriate for you. And it's about, Luke, is it 3 to 4 hours a day of Spanish classes, or how long per day do they attend?
Yes, that's right. I think it's 3 to 4 hours with breaks, of course. Typically, it's class in the morning, afternoons off, Monday through Friday.
Yep.
Okay. A couple people are asking about the INEX insurance that's included. If somebody gets sick and needs healthcare in Spain, what does that look like? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's INEX is our international emergency insurance. So it's for emergencies, not just regular checkups. If you have prescriptions back home, you'll want to get a doctor's note so before you go, so that that INEX won't cover that necessarily. But it is more for emergencies. It's for stolen items. You'll have access to a document that talks about the full coverage of what INEX does cover. If you have like a primary care insurance back home, we'd suggest keeping that and then just using this as your supplementary emergency insurance.
All right. Next, people are curious about how to connect with roommates. Tell them about our timeline for inviting people to a Facebook group for the fall.
Yeah, we'll have that ready around the time, around late spring or early summer when you get your placements. And you can introduce yourself in the group, or, not everyone is really excited to talk on Facebook, which is fine. So you can email me too. We'll have a list of where people are located. And for example, last year, people would email me and say, is anyone in my neighborhood? I can check that. I won't share contact information unless you give me permission. But I can connect you guys with people who are in your neighborhood or at your school, or you can do that through Facebook directly. A lot of people last year just posted, this is where I'm living, this is my budget, I want 2 or 3 roommates, who wants to be friends, and people really connected that way. So I think just putting yourself out there, introducing yourself, that's fine. If not, I can look over where your school is located and see who would be kind of in the same area and see if that's a way to connect as well.
Awesome. On one other note about that, we do usually put a Google Map, editable Google Map in our Facebook group, so people can drop pins of where their school placement is or where they're hoping to live. And after a few people have done that, you can start to sort of see a visual representation of who's going to be where, and reach out to people that way too. That's kind of a neat tool that we've got. A couple people are asking about costs that they can expect, and how much they should budget, and physically how they should bring that money, either bring it to Spain or have it available. Lauren, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, so this picture here is a good visual of what to see kind of before you get to Spain. Costs in Spain, like when you get there, it is overall cheaper than big US cities. One of my actual favorite websites to look at before I go travel is called numbeo.com, like the word number, but with an O at the end instead of an R. And that gives you a cost comparison of what to expect. Like, how much does a coffee cost? How much does it cost to go out to eat? We will have a budget guide as well. But I think it really also depends on how diligent you are with your budget when you get there. Some people, we've heard from alumni that they spend like 20 to 25 euros a week on groceries. So that's a pretty cheap expense compared to the US. Traveling around Spain is overall pretty cheap. If you're under 26, you can get an abono card for, Luke, do you remember the cost? Is it 20?
I think it's just under 30 euros for the
Yeah.
youth transit pass for the month.
Yeah. So those are some, it is like overall, it is cheaper living there than the US, but you do have to be still like conscious of your budget. You can, like I said, you can get side jobs tutoring. That's a good way that people have made money. But I think, having a plan before you go on how much you want to spend on groceries, rent, transportation, travel, that's a good thing to have before you get there and get surprised with those costs.
All right, we've got some questions about the CIEE orientation. How long is the orientation for the regular original Teach in Spain program and the basics option, and what's included?
Yeah, so for our regular program, you get 7 nights in a hotel upon arrival, and 4 days of orientation. Orientation's usually about half a day, and there might be there'll be cultural activities and a welcome dinner. Usually there's alumni there that break out into small groups and walk you around Spain, can talk about apartments, how to find tutoring jobs, how to find apartments that way. For our basics program, it's just a 2-night hotel stay with about a day and a half of orientation. So it's a lot smaller. And then for our immersion program, it's 4 nights in a hotel before you go and stay with your host family. And at those orientations, they'll talk about how it works to get your residency, how to set up a bank, how to set up a phone, kind of those logistics that you need to know when you arrive in a new country.
right, here's a good question. And this is a good slide to have it on, I think. Well, the TEFL certificate. A person just wants to confirm that it is optional for Spain, and what the course looks like and what are some of the reasons somebody might take it.
Yeah, so it is, like we said, it is optional to teach in Spain. It's not required. It is an add-on, but it doesn't expire. It is good to have if you're wanting to, say, go travel and teach in a few different countries over the course of a few years. It will look good on your resume. I think that the course itself, it's 11 weeks, it's online with a 20-hour practicum at the end. And it really opens your eyes onto how to manage a classroom, how to work with non-native English speakers, how to make your classroom more fun and interesting versus just being boring. So there's a lot of different aspects to how to be a good teacher, especially if you don't have that experience having taught before, especially to people who don't have English as their first language. Like I said, I took the course and I thought it was really, really helpful, and it made me feel more confident when I moved abroad because I had no idea what I was doing. So I felt like more qualified for myself to go and do that before teaching in another country.
All right, next question. Banking and credit cards, or accessing ATM cards from US bank accounts. How are they going to set up a Spanish bank? Will they be able to use their cards from back in the US? Let's see if you can give them some info about that.
Yeah, so if you have, you'd want to tell your bank at home that you're moving to another country. Make sure you do that before, and you can use your debit card to withdraw money in Spain, but you just have to be aware of fees. So check in with your bank at home to see what kind of international ATM fees there might be. You might be able to use your credit card. But you will be setting up a bank in Spain. And when we enroll you in our pre-departure course, there'll be access to kind of get that application started to open up your bank account in Spain, which is required in order to get your stipend. So you will have to do that. So you will be getting paid in euros to your Spanish bank account. But for accessing your money back home, some people in the past have used TransferWise to put money from their account at home to their Spanish account. But a credit card or, pulling out cash with a debit card every now and then while being aware of fees is something that you can do as well.
All right, follow-up question. How does the payment work from the Madrid government to the Madrid bank account? Is it a check or direct deposit?
Oh, yeah, direct deposit. Yep. And that should be usually around the first week of the next month. So for the October pay, you would get paid around the first week of November.
Awesome. Okay. On the TEFL course, is it a go at your own pace course? Are there certain times of day when you have to be present for that? If somebody is working full time, are they going to be able to do the TEFL course?
Yeah, so it is like we said, 130 hours over 11 weeks. It is a lot of work. If you do have a full-time job, just be aware that you'll have to be budgeting your time wisely. There are a few live modules, I believe. I forget how many, but most of it can be done in your free time. So you can do the work that's due during the week at your own pace. So if you have a schedule, like a full-time job, you should be able to do it when you get home or before. But yeah, mostly at your own pace with due dates each week.
Okay. So a couple questions here. What is a TA, and how will the program help participants get a residence permit after arriving in Spain?
Yeah, so that when you get your visa will only be valid for 90 days. So don't worry if you see the expiration date is around November, December, that is supposed to be that way. When you get to orientation, our team will explain how it works to get that sorted and what needs to be taking place. But that's something that happens in country, and they'll explain the process for you and tell you about how to go about setting your appointments to get your residency, which will allow you to stay in Spain until the end of your contract in late June.
Awesome. You probably see me typing up a storm here. I've got a lot of specific questions that I'm responding to as well.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. Answered that. A couple questions about social life. How can folks meet peers on the program? What does that look like? If someone's trying to imagine how they're going to sort of start off their new social life in Madrid as a CIEE participant.
Yeah, I think this is one of the really great things about CIEE is that we do send a lot of participants over, and a lot of them are people who've never lived abroad before. Maybe they've not traveled much before, and they're all kind of looking for that community as well. So like we said, we'll have you in a Facebook group where you can kind of introduce yourself early on. When you go to orientation, you'll probably be in a cohort of around 100 or more people who will be doing, they just arrived in Spain, they're going through the same process, they're new to teaching abroad. So really, I think if you're open to meeting new people and social and really want to put yourself out there, it's going to be pretty easy to make friends, especially with other CIEE participants, because you'll all be going through this process. And we've noticed too with people who are currently on the program, they've really clung to each other. They're good friends. They've been roommates. They hang out on the weekends, especially because you're all in the same region, that it's easy to travel around the region and meet up with each other. But beyond, if you want to meet people outside of CIEE, Facebook groups are a great way to do that. Expat groups. That's a good way to, if you want to play sports or join clubs, there's always easy ways to do that through meetups or Facebook.
Awesome. Is COVID vaccination required for the program? And what does it look like in managing COVID in Madrid? What kind of, broadly speaking, what kind of rules might they encounter at the schools there?
Yeah, all CIEE participants are required to be vaccinated against COVID. And there might be a requirement to enter Spain with a booster shot. We will give more information on that as it comes. Schools have been open. People are wearing masks and, washing hands, social distancing. I think masks are still required indoors in Madrid. So that is something that you'll be doing. Who knows what September will look like, but yeah, people are still teaching in person. The schools, for example, if you're exposed or you get COVID, the schools have been pretty flexible and understanding if you have a doctor's note. And so I think overall, we've been running this program and people are living their life in Spain as they are back in their home country. So it's been overall really fine and manageable.
Okay, here's a good question. Between all of the different CIEE program options, Immersion, the original program, the basics program, does everybody have the same teaching duties, or does that change from program to program?
Yep, all of them are the same. So it's really just what your program looks like in the beginning with orientation. But everyone is there as a language and culture assistant teaching in a public school in the region of Madrid. They all have the same teaching hours, same salary. Everything else is the same.
Okay, I have a couple questions I'm just going to ask and answer myself.
Cool.
First is what recommendations do we have for specific phone companies or phone plans? We don't recommend specific companies, and as far as what kinds of plans are available, you can find the full spectrum of options. You know, you could do like a year-long contract with unlimited data, and something that, you know, a lot of people in the US might be used to. It's going to be more expensive. I don't have specific estimates about that, but I know it is more expensive. Or you could go for, you know, a bare bones, you know, pay-as-you-go plan where it's just phone and really basic texting, and then you just, you know, use Wi-Fi to access apps, and you can find everything in between. So essentially, you can spend as much or as little on a phone plan as you want, and there's lots of options there, and it's quite easy to set up after arrival. So you know, because the companies change their offerings, we don't try to keep up with that. We just want to assure people that, you know, they can either buy a cheap phone there for like a non-smartphone, or bring an unlocked smartphone from the US and pop a SIM card in it, and then they'll have access to a Spanish phone system. The other question made me smile. Will both of you be there at orientation in Spain? We'd love to be there. Small chance that we'll be able to join, but realistically, our orientations are organized by our in-country team. Laura Cañadillas is the main point person. She's got some colleagues who help her out for our Teach in Spain Madrid-based team, and they organize those orientations on arrival and offer our in-country support. So they're available with, you know, office hours or video meetings or just phone calls or emails. And they also do have a rotating emergency phone. So there's a number you could call on an emergency 24/7, and you could always reach somebody at CIEE from that in-country team, which is great.
Yeah, I think really quick, Luke and I, when we introduce ourselves, we both live in Portland, Maine. So we're up in the Northeast.
Okay. A couple questions about COVID boosters. Spain is implementing a rule where if your original COVID vaccine is more than 270 days old, which for most of us it will be, they consider that to be expired, essentially, and that person would be considered unvaccinated until they had a booster shot. So there's no expiration date yet for the booster shot, but our recommendation is, our expectation is, if you want to teach in Spain this fall, unless you got your original COVID vaccine pretty recently, you should get a booster shot as soon as you're eligible. And that should keep you up to date with the latest regulations for participating and entering Spain. Of course, that could change in the next, you know, 6-7 months, and we'll keep people posted about that. But boosters, yes, if you're eligible, and that should keep you on track. All right, I had a question. I'll pass this one to you, Lauren. What does the, you know, what's the sort of cross section of our participant group look like? Are most people recent graduates from college? Are there a lot of people, you know, who are farther away from graduation?
Yeah, I think just by having looked at some applications recently, I think we're at about half and half. So some people, a lot of graduating seniors, I would say it's probably like 1/3 to a half of the group. And then there's a lot of people who it's career break or just want to do something different. A lot of people who missed their study abroad in 2020. So we have that group as well. But yeah, I think it's half are recent grads and then maybe people upper 20s, 30s. Spain takes people up to age 59. So it can be, we get people from all over the place.
Okay, couple questions about the application deadline and the turnaround time for hearing back after submitting a complete application, and then how quickly after the decision people should be ready to make a deposit or make a decision.
Yeah, so the application deadline, as we said, is March 1st. When people submit their application, it takes us about 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes less, to get back to you. And if you have any questions in that time, if you're wondering if something in your application is off, you can completely just reach out to us over email or phone. But yeah, typically about 2 weeks. After that, we'll send out an email with instructions on how to commit to the program. And we ask that you make that decision within 10 days. But that's from the time that you're accepted to that 10-day window, it's a good time to reach out to us again to see if you have any hesitancy. Do you have any questions, follow up? Like, we love chatting on the phone and seeing like what your thoughts are. And so we ask for that commitment within 10 days of being accepted into the program.
Okay. Let's see. If somebody's living in a suburb, would they still have access to things like grocery stores?
Yeah.
And related question, are rents more expensive in the city center and less expensive in other parts of the region?
Yeah, so it will be cheaper to live in the suburbs and also cheaper to live with roommates. And there is access to grocery stores. We actually just had someone who he's living in the suburb near his school. It's an 8-minute walk. He lives 2 minutes to 2 different grocery stores, and he pays 280 euros a month on rent with roommates. So you can find those cheaper options of living. It just depends on if you want to live, downtown versus the suburb. But yeah, you'll have access to the necessities that you need, especially with the great public transit too.
Okay, and on the other end of things, if somebody wants to live with roommates in one of the trendy neighborhoods in the city center, off the cuff, what kind of rent costs might they expect per person in those areas?
Yeah, so I think, for example, in this picture that I really like, this is Kat. She did an Instagram takeover for us. She lives in the city center in a apartment with 4 people. And also this is the view from her bedroom. So I'm very, like I said, very jealous. And she pays 480 euros a month for that in a room shared with people. And I believe that was including her utilities, but it is doable to stay around the 500 range if you want to be in the downtown area with roommates, as I keep saying.
Okay. Let's see. Does the iNext insurance cover doctor's visits for things that are not emergencies? If somebody has, I don't know, an eye infection or something, and they go to a doctor and get treatment for that, how does that work as far as iNext?
Do you want to answer that question, Luke?
Sure. Yes, I
Cool,
can answer.
thanks.
Yeah. So the way iNext handles claims is it covers expenses that are for illnesses, medically necessary expenses for illnesses that are unexpected or unforeseen. So that could be an emergency. If somebody gets hit by a car or has nasty COVID case and needs to be hospitalized, that's unexpected and it's an emergency. Of course, you'd be able to for small and medium things, you would need to pay out of pocket and then file a claim for reimbursement. For something large like a hospitalization, there are opportunities to actually just connect the hospital directly with the insurance company. So you're not on the hook for an expensive surgery or something. But there's also things that are unexpected, unforeseen, but not emergencies, right? Somebody has a bad flu, somebody has, some kind of infection that needs antibiotics. You can go to a doctor, be seen for that, get a prescription, fill it, take the medication you need. You would need to pay out of pocket for those things. You'd collect documentation of your diagnosis and prescription and your receipts for expenses, and then you'd be able to submit a claim for reimbursement. INEX has a limit of $100,000 for medical claims. And what else? It can't be for preventative care, contraception, birth, extreme sports. There are some exceptions to it. It doesn't have any coverage in your home country. So if you're planning to make visits home, it's important to have a plan for health insurance coverage while you're there. Another way I like to explain it is with diabetes as an example condition. If someone is living with diabetes, they're probably going to need insulin or test strips, or they may need insulin or test strips. Those are predictable expenses and not something that INEX would cover. So they'd have to either have their own insurance or be prepared to self-insure for that. But if somebody has a flare-up, if there's a diabetic emergency and somebody is hospitalized for that, that's unexpected and is eligible for coverage by INEX. So just because it's pre-existing, if something flares up and you need urgent care, it doesn't disqualify it. Same thing, even if it's a small thing, if it's unexpected, it doesn't have to be an emergency room trip to activate INEX. So I hope that's a helpful answer. Okay, we get this question a lot, so I think it can't hurt to answer it another time. What's the difference between the regular program and the basics program? Teach in Spain regular, Teach in Spain basics.
Yeah, so our regular program is just our original program. You have the same teaching duties, but you get 7-day hotel stay with 4 days of orientation. And then we were hearing that people wanted to not go to the full orientation, not want to do the whole hotel stay because they had already lived abroad before, they already knew Spanish, they had taught before. So they wanted an option to kind of opt out of the full orientation. So for people who have those qualifications, they can just have an expedited hotel stay and orientation. They still will get in-country support, but it's just a quicker process.
All right, I think we're catching up on questions here. This presentation is being recorded. We'll share the recording and the slides with everybody who signed up in the next 24 hours or so. Let's see. Yeah, there are a couple more specific questions that I think I'll just type answers to here. Any tips for the personal statement? A couple questions I know we got about that. What's the best way to write that? Lauren, I'll pass that to you while I type some responses here.
Yeah, so there is a guide on what kind of questions to answer. We're really looking for like why do you want to go teach and live in another country? We don't, some people worry a bit that they're like, well, I have no teaching experience, so I don't know how to write about teaching experience in my personal statement. That's okay. Like, we're really looking for people who are adaptable to new environments. They have a passion for learning about other countries and cultures. So we're really looking at like how you yourself would do with living in a new environment in a place maybe you've never been before. So just really emphasize those skills that you could have in a teaching position abroad. And also, I get this question a lot, but if you go over the 800 word limit, that's okay. We're not counting, but it should be within the 800-ish range.
All right, well, we're coming up on time, so let's make this last call for questions. I'll take a few moments here to type responses to the last few that we've got. And I think we'll go ahead and stop the recording now, just so that
Okay.
a little shorter, but thanks everyone who's watching the recording. Have a great day.